Honey, I don't know where honey they get from. Honey ain't got nowhere anymore. So one thing for we, I say to people, I say, y'all don't understand when folks come on the island, why people run them off when they come to me, I want to buy your land. You can't buy my whole legacy, my whole family. That's what you asking me.
Right.
So folks, get on off and run you now. Get on off, I can give you 2 minutes. Get on off now. People say, oh my gosh, the people on the island are a little hostile. Well, you did a hostile attack, you asked for their land. So even as I was preparing for this, and I said, wow, we went to school on St. Helena Elementary, St. Helena Junior High, St. Helena High. We had all that. We had teachers look like us. We had people that celebrated who we were. People who would tear your butt up here at the school, tell your mama, she tear your butt up at home, tell your pastor, they tear your butt up at church, and then you come back and act right at school. Because you come to school to get your lesson. But do you know in all the lessons they didn't teach us about St. Helena? So it wasn't until I was an adult and I traveled and I started picking up books, I kept seeing images. I'm like, that's my home. Then I started reading diaries like Charlotte Fortin's, and I'm like, my God, people wrote this down about us. Why didn't we read this in school? Instead of Homer's The Iliad. Why didn't we read this in school instead of Shakespeare? I enjoy all of those things, but yet it's not about me. Imagine the difference if we had been told about the Emancipation Proclamation and this being the place in which it was first read. Beaufort County. And now 150 years later, everybody's saying it. Why did it take 150 years? There's so many spectacular things and spectacular people that came out of this island and this county. I can't even listen for you. And people that came through here, too. And they all, no matter what period of time, saw the same thing I see today. People who love one another, respect one another, want their island, want their land, and have not forgotten who they are. So even if in front of you they speak to you like this so that they know that, you won't tease them, or you might not ask them to go ahead and speak the Gullah language or anything on tape. They will articulate everything this way until you turn your back and they say, yeah, I'm so glad that people get on China. Write a story? Write a story? So when I sat back and I started looking and I started going through our archive for things, and I said, well, we're going to do reflections of St. Helena. There's so many things I could draw on. There's so many things I could do. What should I read? And I went to go get, actually, the Emancipation Oaks image to see if I could find it. And all of a sudden, I saw Martin Delaney's name. And I said, what Martin Delaney got to do with St. Helena Island? I said, Martin Delaney was an abolitionist. I said, okay, this might be a mistake. Let me click this thing on the internet, see what it is. And then I saw this thing said, history is a weapon. First thing I saw. And I said, oh, this is my kind of page right here. I got to read. Okay. And it says, from the Voices of a People's History, edited by Zinn and Armold, it said, in this fiery speech, Martin Robinson Delaney, the son of free blacks and a leading African-American officer in the Union Army, speaks to a congregation of several hundred at St. Helena Island, South Carolina, about the struggle against slavery and the struggle for freedom after the Emancipation Proclamation. Delaney was employed by the Freedmen's Bureau at the end of the Civil War, but the Bureau, worried about its politics, sent Lieutenant Edward M. Stober to listen to the address at Brick Church at St. Helena Island. His account is the only existing text of the speech. Stober noted, the excitement with the congregation was immense, and others were given to some particular sentence of the speech. Afterwards, congregants told Stober they would get rid of the Yankee employer and that Delaney is the only man who ever told them the truth. Now, he was here where we all could walk out this building and walk right to Brick Church, July 23rd, 1865. How many people in this room knew that? So listen to what he said that night. He said it was only a war policy of the government to declare the slaves of the South free, knowing that the whole power of the South lay in possession of the slaves. But I want you to understand that we would not have become free had we not armed ourselves and fought out our independence. If I had been a slave, I would have been the most troublesome and not to be conquered by any threat or punishment. I would not have worked, and no one would have dared to come near me. I would have struggled for life or death and would have thrown fire and sword between them. I know you've been good, only too good. I was told by a friend of mine that when you were owned by a man and put to work in the field, that he laid quietly down and just looked out for the overseer to come along. And when he showed up, he pretended to work real hard. But he confessed to me that he had never done a fair day's work for his master. And so he was right. So I would have done the same. And all of you ought to have done the same. Amen. People say that you are too lazy to work, that you have no intelligence to get on for yourselves without being guided and driven to the work by your overseers. I say it's a lie, a blasphemous lie, and I will prove it to be. I'm going to tell you now what you're worth. As you know, Christopher Columbus, he landed here in 1492. They came here for the purpose to dig gold and gather precious pearls and diamonds and all sorts of jewels, only for the proud aristocracy of the white Spaniards and the Portuguese to adorn their persons, to have brooches for their breasts and earrings for their ears and bracelets for their ankles and rings for their limbs and their fingers. They found here Indians whom they obliged to dig and work and slave for them. But they found out that they died away too fast and could not stand the work. In the course of time, they had taken some blacks along with them and put them to work. They could not stand it, and yet the whites say they are the superior race, though they could not stand it. Their work was so profitable that those poor blacks did that in the year of 1502, Charles V gave permission to import into America yearly 4,000 blacks. The profit of these sales was immense, that afterwards even the Virgin Queen of England and James II took to the slave trade and were accumulating great wealth for the treasury of their government. And so, you have always been, I tell you, I've been all over Africa, and I tell you, because I was born there, and tell you as I could to the geographical faculty of London, the same way I spoke to them, that these people there are as well driving class of cultivators, and I never saw or heard of one of our brethren there to travel without taking seeds with him, as much as he can carry, and to sow it wherever he goes, or to exchange it with his brethren. So you ought further to know that all the spices, cotton, rice, and coffee has only been brought over by you from the land of our brethren. If I look around me, I can tell that all the houses on the island and in Beaufort, they are all familiar to my eye. But they are the same structures which I have met with in Africa. They have all been made by Negroes. You can see it by their exteriors. I tell you, they can't teach you anything. They could not make them because they have no brain to do it. At least, I mean, the Southern people. Oh, the Yankees, they're smart. Now, tell me, from all you've heard of me, are you not worth anything? Are you those men whom they think God only created as a curse and a slave? Whom they do not consider their equals? As I said before, the Yankees are smart. There are good ones,
Yes.
and there are bad ones. The good ones, if they're good, they're very good. But the bad ones, if they're bad, they're very bad. But the worst and most contemptible, and even worse than even your masters, are those Yankees who hired themselves out as overseers. Believe not in the school teachers, the emissaries, ministers, agents, because they never tell you the truth. And I particularly warn you against the cotton agents who come honey-mouthed to you. Their only intent being to make profit by your inexperience. If there's a man who comes to you to meddle in your affairs, send him to one of your more enlightened brothers, who shall ask him who he is and what business he seeks of you. Believe none but those agents who are sent out by the government to enlighten and to guide you. I'm an officer of the service of the U.S. government and ordered by General Rufus Saxton, who has been lately appointed Assistant Commissioner from South Carolina. So is General Edward A. Wild, Assistant Commissioner for Georgia. When Chief Justice Salomon P. Chase was down here to speak to you, some of those malicious and abominable New York papers derived from it that he only seeks to be elected by you as the president. I have no such ambition. I let them have for president a white or black man. I don't dare who it be. It may be who has a mind to. I shall not be intimidated, whether by threats or imprisonment. And no power will keep me from telling you the truth.
Amen.
So I express myself even in Charleston, the hotbed of those scoundrels and your old masters, without tear or reluctance. So I will come to the main purpose for which I have come to see you. As before, the whole South depended on you. The whole country will depend on you now. I give you advice on how to get along. Get up a community and get as much land as you can. If you cannot get it singly, grow as much vegetables, etc. as you want for your families. And on the other part of the land, cultivate rice and cotton. Now, for instance, 1 acre will grow a crop of cotton of $90. Now, a land with 10 acres can bring $900 a year. If you cannot get the land yourself, the community can, and divide the profit. There is tobacco, for instance. Virginia is a great place for tobacco. There are whole squares at Dublin and Liverpool named after some place of tobacco notoriety. So you see what enormous value your labor has been as a benefit to your masters. Now you understand. I want you to be producers of this country. It is the wish of the government for you to be so. We will send friends to you. We'll further instruct you on how to come to the end of your wishes. You see that by adhering to your views, you will become a wealthy and a powerful population. Now I look around me, and I notice a man, barefooted, covered with rags and dirt. Now I ask, what is the man doing? For whom is he working? I hear that he works for that farmer over there for 30 cents a day. I tell you, that must not be. That would be cursed slavery all over again. I will not have it. The government will not have it, and the government shall hear about it. I will tell the government. I tell you slavery is over and shall never return again. We have now 200,000 of our men and well drilled in arms and used to warfare, and I tell you, slavery shall not come back again. If you are determined, it will not return again. Now go to work, and in a short time, I will see you again, and other friends will come to show you how to begin. Have your fields in good order, well tilled and planted. And when I pass the fields and see land well planted and well cared for, then I may be sure by the look of it that it belongs to a free Negro. And when I see a field thinly planted and little cared for, I will think it belongs to some man who works with slaves.
Amen.